Good morning. Today we're going to be discussing day 6. This has taken us like 2 months to get to day 6, which is completely fine. I don't know about you, but I've enjoyed hearing discussion about the days of creation, and seriously, we have only scratched, not even the surface. We're like inching towards the surface. We haven't even gotten that close. There's so much to think about and to talk about. Books have been written about these 6 days, hundreds of pages, and I only have a few of those pages that I'm going to share with you, but it's just been interesting to me. In 1999, the Los Angeles Times, in June 25th edition, reported a rocket carrying a NASA telescope lifted off from Cape Canaveral on a 3-year, $204 million mission to try to discover the origin of the universe. NASA's Far Ultraviolet Spectroscopic Explorer, or FUSE for short, attempted to find out what was in the first chapter of Genesis. We've only taken 2 months. They're on a 3-year mission. And it was not successful, if you can imagine. Satan, who is the father of lies, according to John 8, verse 44, tells 2 whoppers. And they provide the basic structure for what mankind looks at today and thinks about today and thinks is real today. First, he says life is random, or he tries to get people to believe that life just happened from randomly. There was an explosion in space, or there was a single cell that mutated and transformed into a sea creature and got up on land and formed legs and crawled up into the shape of an animal that eventually stood upright into us. And my question about all of that is, okay, where did the water come from that the little creature was at? Where did the single cell come from? Where did the explosion come from? Something had to originate this. Something had to originate. The second lie is that truth is relative. And the Bible is not the Word of God, does not give us the truth about right and wrong, life and death, morality and immorality, and there's no authority beyond yourself. Life is random, truth is relative, just how you feel about things. As Christians, we don't believe that life is random. We believe that God created the universe, the heavens and the earth. We believe that it is sustained and ruled by Him. We do not believe that truth is relative, but is absolute and revealed on the pages of Scripture. The things that we must do are written here. The things that we are to avoid are not written here. Or they're written in a way that tells us to avoid them. There are issues that aren't discussed in the Bible, and those we have choice. We can make our choice on those things. But this word is true. The Christian view is that the universe around us is the work of God and His creative hand, if He has hands. Not sure He does. But we always think of, and you see the picture of God supposedly coming down and touching human and forming human at the touch of His hand. But that's not exactly what the picture that the Bible talks about. It does say that He formed us. But whether He might have used feet on some of you guys to form some of you, but His hand, whatever. Okay. We do know that He created us, He formed us. And we believe Genesis is as true as any other part of Scripture. And no part of evolutionary lie is more loudly proclaimed than the evolution of man. That we are now an upright creature. And it's interesting to me as I grow older that I begin to go more down and down like maybe a chimpanzee, I'm not sure. They say that the progression of human evolution is going from this one stage to another, right? And it's taught to every public school child in public education that mankind has come from apes, and this is not true. And I hope to at least give you some information about that as we read through here. So let's look at Genesis chapter 1, and we're starting in verse 24, and we're going to read through the end of the chapter. And God said, "Let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds, the livestock, the creatures that move along the ground, and the wild animals, each according to its kind." And it was so. God made the wild animals according to their kinds, the livestock according to their kinds, and all the creatures that move along the ground according to their kinds. And God saw that it was good. Then God said, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness, so that they may rule over the fish in the sea," and I almost said the fish in the sky, "the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky, over the livestock and over all the wild animals, over all the creatures that move along the ground." God created mankind in his own image. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. He created them. God blessed them and said to them, "Be fruitful and increase in number. Fill the earth and subdue it. Rule over the fish in the sea and the birds in the sky and over every living creature that moves along the ground." Then God said, "I give you every seed-bearing plant on the face of the earth, the whole earth, and every tree that has fruit with seed in it. They will be yours for food, and to all the beasts of the earth, and to all the birds of the sky, and to all the creatures that move along the ground, everything that has breath of life in it. I give every green plant for food," and it was so. God saw all that he had made, and it was very good. And there was evening and there was morning, the sixth day. So let's look first at the creation of animals. Land animals. And I'm sorry, everyone, I'm letting you down because Paul's fantabulous slideshow last week showing all the sea creatures and the birds of flight. I just got a pig and a ladybug and a polar bear to share with you. Sorry, got too far ahead of myself. So this is the final day of creation. We think of created it in 7 days. He actually created things in 6 days. And on the seventh day, we're going to find out next week that he took a rest from that. But this is the final day of creation, the creation of land animals. They followed the same pattern as the other days of creating the plants, the sea creatures, and also the birds of flight. And God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, livestock after their kind, everything that creeps on the ground after its kind. God saw it was good. We're not going to see a ladybug transform into a polar bear, or a ladybug transform into a pig. I love how that pig is looking at you, by the way. He's not looking at me, but he's looking at you, so just pay attention. On day 5, remember from last week, God created the animals in the sea and the birds in the sky. And so on the beginning of the 6th day, it seems fitting that he would create creatures of livestock, things that move along the ground, and animals that are wild, that roam the earth. And these animals are separated in 3 kind of distinct categories here. Livestock may be a reference to animals which may be tamed and domesticated for man's use. This would generally be things that you could ride, things that you could milk, things that you could use for your own pleasure. Would include all kinds of different things like horses and mules and cows and goats and sheep, but they would also probably include dogs and cats and even pot-bellied pigs. The second category includes creatures that move along the ground or burrow into it. And this refers to snakes and lizards and spiders, and probably stretches beyond that to include lizards and things that creep along the ground and have short little legs, insects, small animals, the things that scurry across the ground like rabbits or gophers or rats or frogs and skunks. You might look at Leviticus chapter 11, verses 29 through 31 if you're taking notes, and that also talks about some of those animals. Well, I have a thought question for you. How could beetles prove or demonstrate or reveal God's creation? Oh, no, not those beetles, these beetles. Okay, there you go. This is the bombardier beetle. It's kind of an interesting looking thing on screen. I'm sure if it was sitting next to you, you'd be a little squirmy, but it is a fantastic insect. And how do I say that it proves God's existence or God's creation? Well, let me show you a diagram. These little beetles have some tanks on their back in that big body where gases, two separate gases mix, and out comes their exhaust pipe, 214 degrees Fahrenheit, I think, or 212, explosion, and that's how they protect themselves. That's how they fend off enemies approaching. I know some of you might have that abilities. I know my youngest son does. But I'm wondering how many of these little suckers got blown up if evolution took place. How do you mix how much gas and how much where and when and all that kind of stuff? How perfectly designed this is. An explosion takes place from hydrogen peroxide and hydroquinone and mixes together, and an explosion scares off their enemies. God created such intricacies to insects. You look at worms or caterpillars and the little ladies that are climbing out of those things, and all the creatures that move along the ground, the little bunnies and the fur and the, why do they hop? Why don't they walk like something else, right? And so God, in one day, one morning, creates these domesticated animals, livestock, insects, wild animals, with all of these interesting peculiarities that often don't relate to others. Now we have eyes and we have legs that are, okay, we could say those are similarities, but things like antenna, I mean, I know your mom, you kids, you think your mom has an antenna where she can tell what you're up to and what you've been doing and straighten up and things like that, but they don't really have that. And so we've got all these interesting features of these creatures. And so you got livestock, you got things that move across the ground, and the third category are wild animals. Some translations say they are beasts of the earth or beasts of the field. And these would be four-legged animals of some size, even large size, generally not tamed. This would include things like lions and tigers and bears.
Oh my.
Thank you. I was hoping Quentin would do that. That also includes giraffes, elephants, rhinos, hippos, animals like that. Non-domesticated for the purposes of man. Now, you're going to say, well, they train elephants. Okay, they can be trained, but you don't have an elephant in your house and say, come on, let's go. In general, this is going to be large, untamed mammals that roam the earth. And I want to point out that all three of these categories were simultaneously made. There was no progression. There was not, okay, let's build the smallest one first, they'll grow into the biggest one. They didn't evolve out of each other, but the power of God created all these animals, and isn't it astounding, the variety of it all? And how many? I mean, Paul showed us 3 or 4 dozen, maybe, creatures of the fish and the birds. But he only gave us a little bit of them. There's so many more beyond that we could come up with or we could look at and discover, I guess. And a lot of these animals we are just discovering pretty much for the first time. So there's always new animals that we find and discover. The power of God creates these animals and giving us a variety. The fish in the sea and the animals in the sky, the birds of the sky, the animals that move across the ground, the mammals, those that swim in the sea even. It's staggering. And add to that all these insects and reptiles. By the way, there's a reptile show down in Sacramento going on. And all the things that crawl over the earth. It just boggles our minds that God has such a vast capability intellectually to conceive of these things, that how they work and how they move and how they are designed. He did it. He does it. Creating animals would be the final touch as God prepares a home for man, the focal point of creation. Everything else in the universe will go out of existence sometime in the future. The stars will fall, the sun will go out, the moon will come to an end, the whole universe will roll up like a scroll, the whole creation will melt with fervent heat. Peter tells us in 2 Peter 3, 1 through 12. So the things God creates, he puts in place for a purpose, and the purpose is the next part of creation. That's the creating of man. So he creates these animals, and it's interesting how the passage we read in Genesis 1 here says that let the land produce living creatures. I thought that was interesting. I kept reading that because it says God created, but it says let the land produce living creatures according to their kinds. And just like he's going to form man out of the dust of the earth, he's going to form these animals because they're made up of the same chemicals that earth is. The bodies of these animals are composed of the same elements. They come out of the earth to be shaped and formed. They're going to go back to the earth throughout eternity. There may be a caveat to that, and there may be when God creates new heavens and a new earth, that he creates animals as well. I can't not argue that, or I can't disprove that. But it seems to me that the whole reason for this is that for the creation of man. And man are going to be made of the same elements, same physical elements that these animals did, according to Genesis 2, verse 7. The same chemical material. They are all made according to their kind. But I think one day this material world will be uncreated. All the atomic energy that was used to create it is going to be let go, and it's going to go back to whatever it needs to be. Every plant, every tree, every occupant of the sea, every bird, every land animal, every creature everywhere in the universe will go back to the dust and out of existence. But not all. Only man's physical body will do that. Man's spirit continues. Remember the video that was shown a couple weeks ago from Raymond Fox? And he talked about it, at least in the first part of it, I believe, how that we are not now, nor were we ever animals. We did not evolve from monkeys. And we're different than animals. Remember his video from a couple weeks ago, and here's the creature. Of course, one's been added. No telling what's going to happen after that. So I might just want to move past that. But he mentioned that we are creative beings who search for moral greatness, to spiritually do the right thing. And you can't say that about animals. Animals don't search for moral greatness. They don't do what's best for their neighbor necessarily. They're out to survive. It's survival of those things. And we have a certain spiritual language. We have the ability to demonstrate love and grace and mercy that at least is not evident in the animal kingdom. We have compassionate side to us, and we can exhibit humility and forgiveness. And so God creates now, he creates humans, he creates man from the dust of the earth. The reason for man's creation, well, let me just ask you, what do you think the reason for man's creation was? Was it a hobby for God? Or a science project? Let's see if I could do this? Or I'm bored one day, day 6, I'm kind of bored with things, and let me create a man or a woman after that. I believe, as I'm reading through here and as I'm thinking about this, so this is my belief part where I just think about it. I think that God seeks a bride to prepare for his son. That's what the New Testament talks about. It says that we are the bride of Christ. And we are awaiting the time when Jesus comes back to take us and to wed us, if you will, into a beautiful family, into a beautiful relationship. And he seeks to demonstrate his grace and his mercy and his compassion and love and saving power towards that bride. 1 John chapter 4, verse 8 tells us. The text of Genesis spends more time on man's creation than any other element of the creation of the universe. And chapter 2 is going to expand lots on the creation of man because it's so critical. And I think men and women are the focal point of God's design, of God's masterpiece. Man is the pinnacle of his creation. And we're going to find out in just a moment that we are created in God's image. The rest of the creation simply is preparation for man's arrival on the scene. Okay. Now we're going to come to the climax of God's creation here. God created man in his own image. There's a phrase there that is talked about. It says, let us make man. Let us do this. At this point, God becomes very personal. And instead of let it be created, he says, let us make man in our image. The Godhead introduces himself personally. In John chapter 1, verse 3, it says that through Jesus, all things were created. The Spirit of God is also involved in His creation. Genesis 1:2, where the Spirit moved across the face of the deep. God created the human race. He didn't employ impersonal terminology like let there be light, but He uses this, let us make man in our image. We're introduced by Elohim, as Steve mentioned a little bit ago. Elohim, interestingly, is in a plural. It's a plural Hebrew term. And so it's not talking about many gods, but it's talking about the Godhead, the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit, making up God. And somewhere before the foundation of the world, there was a plan put in place, according to 2 Timothy 1, verses 9 through 10. First, He had to purpose to create humans, and then God will use this plan to bring glory to that redeemed humanity as He redeems them from their sin. God determined before creation that He would save sinners, that He would create them, would save them, and bring them to glory as a bride for His Son, who would serve and adore His Son forever and ever. 1 Peter chapter 1, verse 20 and 21. He also wrote their names in a book before the foundation of the world. God said, let us make man in our image. This is the climax of day 6. Now, as incredible as you and I are, and I believe undoubtedly each of us is incredible, even though we don't think about us that way sometimes. We think about how much of a problem we are or how big of mistakes we've made, but I want you to know that you're incredible. Well, let's just talk about how incredible you are. Larry's looking right at me or through me, I'm not sure. But Larry, do you know that your eyes are attached to your brain by 250,000 nerve lines? And that's why you can see colors, and that's why you can see me, and that's why I'm not a flat screen up here. I'm not like medieval art looked, right? Flat. And that's why you can see colors, you can see depth, and you can see distance, you can see movement. Wouldn't it be boring if everything was gray? Like the Andy Griffith Show? That's Ellie's terminology. They're the gray people on Andy Griffith. But wouldn't it be boring if we were all in black and white or grays? And some of you are wearing gray, sorry about that. I didn't mean to step on your choice of color today. But just the idea of how boring it would be and how unsimilar things would be. Everything would look the same. Everything would be the same. Maybe we can see shadows or something like that. But it's amazing. Just our eyes. And I'll keep picking on Larry because he's right here, but do you feel the blood that's flowing through your body right now? I don't know if you can feel that or not. But you know, you've got about 80,000 miles of blood vessels and arteries through your body, that this blood is moving and circulating and coming from your heart and gets air from your lungs. And as the writer of the Old Testament said, we are fearfully and wonderfully made. Incredible. He forms man from dust of the ground. Yet all these, and just with basic elements, but all these intricate systems that we have in our body, the respiratory system, the vascular system, blood system, all the nerve system, all these, the structure of our bones, and how our legs bend backwards. Can you imagine what chairs would look like if our legs bent forwards instead of backwards? Chairs would have to be completely redesigned, right? If we could not bend our legs backwards. You either have your feet sticking straight out or something, right? We're beautifully, wonderfully, incredibly made. But he forms us from, at least he formed the first man, Adam, from the dust of the ground. That's chapter 2, verse 7. I don't want to get there because that's another sermon. That's why bodies decompose. They go back to dust. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust, as the preacher will one day say about you. And he breathed into man the breath of life. And man became a living being. And here's another component that just is not found in DNA. Another component that is wonderfully mysterious. It's the image of God. He created Adam in the image of God. Nothing that God has created at this point had any personal connection to him. Sorry, but there's no dog or cat that is related to God in any personal way, but there is creative being that's related, and that's humans. And that's so amazing. Before time began, God made a promise to redeem some created things, and he was going to redeem them by means of Jesus Christ. And that plan was to redeem humanity. We are the Father's love gift to the Son as we become his bride. Every other created thing was only meant to provide a world for man, which would cause man to praise and glorify God. Only man is able to be made in the image, the Zium, which means to carve out or to cut off from God. We are carved in his image. Notice 4 features that set man apart. The first is pretty obvious. Man is made in the image of God. We're created on a heavenly pattern. At least Adam was. I'm not sure how that connects on down the line, but we do know that the first man was created this way on some divine pattern, eternal pattern. Biologically, we share with other creatures. We live together in a common environment. But we are significant because we have literally been carved out or cut off of God's image. It's spiritual carving. And man was made in the image of God. That's the first thing. The second thing is that he gave mankind the authority to rule and subdue creation, so that we have authority over creation. That doesn't mean that we get to be mean to creation, but we're to rule it and take care of it so that it sustains itself, right? We have authority and dominion over plants, over animals. I guess until we come to the eating part, then they're sort of at a disadvantage in that respect. The third thing, man was made to populate the earth, to be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it. I think that's Roseville. I was driving yesterday and I'm thinking there's got to be every living person here driving in Roseville today, because I just could not catch a break, it seemed like. You know, when you get up to Auburn or past that, there's still cars, there's a lot less cars. There's still people, but there's a lot less people. And it's just a big sigh of relief. But man's mission was to populate the earth, to be fruitful and increase in number. This is going to be very discouraging to Adam when he sees all the animals come by and God asks him to name them, and he's not going to find somebody that is like him, that's suitable for him. Thankfully, God takes care of that, and I'll let that person talk about that. One last distinguishing characteristic, and this is, if you're going to talk about personality and relationship that God has with us, special relationship, special personal connection with us, you have to talk about language. And relationship comes down to communication, to speak abstractly, to reason abstractly. Comedian John Branyan says, God must have had a sense of humor when he made man and woman. Two totally different individuals, different abilities, different ways of processing, different ways of expressing emotions, opposite ways of communication, not alike in any way. And I'm going to make them spend the rest of their lives together. He made man first, and he took a rib to create woman, and clearly that was the rib we use to read minds, because we don't have that ability any longer. Man and woman relationships are awesome, though. And it's interesting how that even though we are different, man, woman are different, generally speaking, we still get along, and we still love each other, we still help each other, and we work in tandem with each other. It's such a beautiful, beautiful thing. So man is made in the image of God. It's repeated chapter 5 and other places. And by the way, Adam is the only one being made in this divine pattern. The rest of us come from his lineage. But we still have a spirit like he did, right? The truest part of man cannot be seen in DNA. It cannot be found in chromosomes. It cannot be found by dissecting his brain. It cannot be found by cutting open his heart. It cannot be found by tinkering with his nervous system. You can take all the science experiments you want, all the anatomy of a human being. You will never discover the truest part of mankind, our spirits, that distinct spiritual nature created in each of us. Look over to Ecclesiastes chapter 3. Down in verse 11. He has made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. Eternity in the human heart. What a wonderful statement. And then look down at verse 21. Who knows if human spirit rises upward and the spirit of the animal goes down to the earth. And so we have a beautiful connection with God, the Spirit that is inside of us, eternity that is set in our hearts, that dogs and animals and other insects and creatures, birds and fish don't have. You can take away our body, we'll live forever. And so the image of God isn't talking about some kind of physical form. It's the image of God that his attributes, and they're not shared with any other animals. Back in Genesis 1, verse 28, it says, "Be fruitful and increase in number, fill the earth and subdue it." You see, man was designed by God to be the sovereign of the planet, to be the king of the earth. Have you ever asked why God filled this world with such variety of food? Even the plants alone. Some of you may be vegetarians or newly interested in eating more vegetables. I'm not sure if Larry's part of that, but just think about all the plants, the different variety of plants. And think of all the different types of meats that we could eat as well. But just the fruits and vegetables. You know, initially man was a vegetarian. He ate from the plants from the ground, he ate from the fruit of the trees. All that grows that was from God's design. And again, God could have made a colorless world. Imagine not only grays, but only rice to eat. How many ways could you fix rice? Let's see. If you didn't have anything else to fix with it, there's one way. You could eat, well, I guess you could eat it crunchy or soft. That's the difference there. But how boring that would be. And perhaps we could, if we had cheese and bacon, we could wrap it around rice and make it more delicacy. But we have such a variety of fruits and vegetables, they just abound. And I love if we're going to eat at Molly's house or whatever, she says, "Can you bring a veggie tray?" Yeah, because you can get all kinds of color and variety and stuff on that tray. It's awesome. And I just scratched the surface with vegetables, right? There's all kinds of things. It's pretty astonishing, pretty complex, pretty unique. When we enjoy our food, and here's something great also that God has blessed us with, and that is taste. You might not say I have the best taste in dress or that kind of stuff, but what I'm talking about is when you're eating and the taste of food. I don't know if you saw the movie What About Bob, but the way he eats fried chicken is, it's amazing. And that's like Marcia with vegetables. It's so good. And I'm looking at couscous and thinking, this is something wrong. This was a mistake. It should not be on a plate. But think about the taste, the ability to taste different things. And associated with memory. Right now, maybe peanut butter on a celery. Could you crunch into that? The sound and the spray of the water from the celery and the taste of the peanut butter, you can taste it right now because your memory, you've done that probably before. And most of our taste, although we have taste buds on our tongue, there's a reason we have a nostril right above that. It's because we smell the food. And the smell connects with our brain, which tells our taste buds what's coming. And so we smell, we taste. Some of you guys smell a lot, but some of you, it just works in tandem. We smell, we taste, we enjoy what God has made for us, the blessing that God has given us, the immense bounty that God has provided. Now in chapter 2, we're going to look further at the discussion of creation of man, and we're going to find out where woman comes from as well. But you'll also notice in like chapter 2, I mentioned it briefly a second ago, but how Adam names animals. And so this idea of language and personality come forth. And wouldn't it have been an honor to name the hundreds of species of animals that came by, the little insects, the snakes and everything? And we could name those one by one. That'd be so awesome. But he created this for us to enjoy. Creation started and ends in 31 days. 31 verses, 6 days. We're going to get more detail as we move through chapter 2. But all the systems are put in place. All the physical systems are in place now. And it's a perfect place for humans to proceed. And our Father did all this for his children. This was not his science experiment. This was not his class project where he built a foaming volcano and everyone oohed and awed. But he did this so mankind could physically live in an amazing environment. And he will send his Son to redeem mankind so they could spiritually live in an even more amazing place. As the Lord said, I go to prepare a place for you. And when I come back, I'm going to take you there. He loves us so much. Wouldn't be fair if we didn't have homework. Right? That's what all teachers think. They think it's fair to have homework, but you as students would say no. But this is fun. This is fun. So what I'd encourage you to do, a couple things. You can do both or just one, or you can do something else. It's not going to be graded. First, you might take a drive up into the Sierras. I know gas is expensive, so you might stop a little short of the actual Sierras and just go to some field out behind your house. Maybe get off on a deserted road and see nature up close. Or go to the zoo and you can see nature brought to you, animals particularly. There are different plants and things like that. I highly recommend the Folsom Zoo, which is a zoo for animals that have been injured typically, and they're brought in there. And it even has a train you can ride, so there. But I want you to think about nature. And then maybe secondly, if you choose to, you can get with your family and get your kids and go to the library. A library is a place where they have books. And books are things like this, where you open and you read words on a page. It's amazing. You might try that. I know I'm being sarcastic, but go to the library, look for some books, or if you want to stay in your bunny slippers and jammies, you can do an internet search and find the most unusual insect or animal. For example, the markhor, which they often call the screw horned goat, or the armadillo girdled lizard, or the duck-billed platypus on the right. But what I'd encourage you to do is find the most unusual insect, animal you can find, and do some research about it and find out what they like to eat and where they like to live and what they do for entertainment, things like that. And so think about God's nature this week and how he's created these things for you to enjoy and as a blessing to you. And also think about your body this week and how it is created in such a way that is such a blessing for you, to help you. He designed us in beautiful, wonderful, amazing ways. Each of you is special. Each of you are very worthwhile, created in God's image. Let's stand and sing. If you're needing to turn from your way of doing things, I encourage you to turn back to God and submit to him. Believe that Jesus Christ is God's Son. Believe that he can redeem you, and he's creating a better place for you. So think about your life and turn away from your old ways and live for Him. We are a moment, you are forever, Lord of the ages, God before time. We are a moment, you are eternal, love everlasting, reigning on high. Holy, holy, Lord God Almighty, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Highest praises, honor, and glory be unto your name. Be unto your name. We are the broken, you are the healer, Jesus Redeemer, mighty to save. You are the love song, we'll sing forever, bowing before you, blessing your name. Holy, holy, Lord God Almighty, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Highest praises, honor, and glory be unto your name. Be unto your name. Holy, holy, Lord God Almighty, worthy is the Lamb who was slain. Highest praises, honor, and glory be unto your name. Be unto your name. Be unto your name.
I'll take the blame on choosing the wrong